It Takes Balls is brought to you by our new sponsor, D's Nuts. Yes, you heard that right. If you've never heard of them, check them out at grabdsnuts.com. But warning, these are not your grandparents' peanuts. D's Nuts is really shaking up the nut game. They're gourmet, fun, and packed with flavor. Whether you're a fan of savory flavors like ranch, sriracha, or hot cheddar, spicy like ghost pepper, or if you have a sweet tooth like me, you'll like the banana pudding. D's Nuts has something for everyone. But D's Nuts aren't just about taste, they're about making a difference. For every bag, can, or piece of D's Nuts merch purchased using the coupon code NUTCHECK on grabdsnuts.com, you can save 10%, and another 10% gets donated towards supporting Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. So the next time you're craving a snack that's both delicious and meaningful, reach for D's Nuts. Because when it comes to supporting Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation, it takes balls and it takes D's Nuts. Available at grabdsnuts.com, Amazon, and Walmart locations nationwide. D's Nuts, a delicious, healthy snack in a variety of fun flavors and making a difference one nut at a time. The stories shared on It Takes Balls are unique to the individual sharing. Always speak with your trusted medical provider for treatment options specific to you. Welcome back to It Takes Balls, presented by Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. I just wanted to let you guys know before this episode interview starts, my audio on this episode had some kind of malfunction and I sounded kind of like an alien. So the audio you're going to hear is from the camera that I'm looking at right now. It's not terrible, but it's not the best. Luckily, the guest's audio sounds okay, which is most important. Unfortunately, I couldn't do anything about this ugly mug that you always look at, so you just have to deal with that in perpetuity. But, without further ado, today I'm joined by a guest from Scotland. He's a testicular cancer survivor. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks very much, Stephen. Thanks for having me on It Takes Balls.
So, I mentioned before we started, just we were talking privately. I don't know too much about your story. I know you've interviewed a lot of guys on Check One Two. So, before we get into your testicular cancer story, tell me a little about who you are before, or, outside of testicular cancer.
My name is Paul McCaffery. I'm the community engagement officer for a charity in Scotland called Cohonas Scotland. We kind of do a lot of work in terms of education, awareness, and support for guys going through testicular cancer. And it's something that I'm passionate about, obviously, because I've had testicular cancer, and I always credit Cohonas for saving my life. So, other than that, I'm just a kind of regular Joe, football, rugby, and spend time with the family. That's me.
Yeah, and I love the Scottish accent. I don't know if I have an accent or what, but I'm sure I do, but I gotta say I'm jealous of yours.
Oh, really? No, you definitely have, but I'm so used to it as well because my dad grew up his formative years in Brooklyn, and my uncle and my auntie they stay out in Philadelphia. So the American accent feels very much like home for me. So
Yeah, those are definitely two specific accents in the U.S. to New York and Philly.
yeah. My dad's lost his accent, but apparently when he first came back, it was quite strong.
All right, so let's get into your testicular cancer story. I know you were diagnosed in 2015, so we're coming up on 10 years here.
Yeah, yeah, nearly 10 years, and it's I can't believe that we're kind of coming up in that 10-year mark already. But it was the end of the year in 2014 that actually my testicular cancer journey kind of started as such. I had been out and I was doing a charity run with my friend who his friend had died of a heart attack at the age of 42. So we were doing a kind of run for that, and I started feeling a little bit of pain in my groin. And I didn't really give it much heed. I grown up, you you can be told about different pains and things like that in the testicles, but you didn't really know how to check properly. Um, Come that December of 2014, I had found that the pain was getting worse. And when I was running down the stairs, it was like somebody was kind of pulling on me. So I was like, "Right, I really don't know what to do." I got a little bit paranoid about it being cancer anyway, just because, I've worked in the health board for, and over here in Scotland for nearly 20 years, being a nursing assistant. And I just got a little bit paranoid, but I didn't know how to check myself. So I inputted testicular cancer, hit Scotland, as I do with most things, and came across the Cojones self-check guide. Um, and I found when I was in the bath, I found a little kind of lump on my testicle. booked an appointment for the my GP, and then I got the flu. So I was kind of incapacitated for a couple of weeks anyway. I'd done what most men, certainly most guys that I speak to anyway, do, and I cancelled that appointment, thinking, oh, it'll be nothing. So I put it off for about a month, and it wasn't until that kind of January in 2015 that when I went to the doctors and they were like, yeah, there's something wrong here, ultrasound, and then it kind of positively ID'd it as a little cancer. So yeah, that's where it all began for me.
I've talked to guys in England, and they've talked a little bit about their healthcare system. Is the healthcare system in Scotland similar to like England, where it's you have the GP and then you have to kind of pay extra to see a specialist, or how does that work for you?
So for us, we're really lucky that our healthcare system, even though we are technically one country as Great Britain, um, our healthcare system is independent to Scotland. So we actually don't have to pay any extra money. So like in my GP appointment, then when I went to see a specialist, is all covered under the NHS, and then even my prescriptions and all that and my treatment was all covered. So yeah, it's just that little difference, which is weird considering geographically we're so small, but so close and technically one country. But yeah, thankfully in Scotland, we've got that kind of down to making it okay for people just to get these things done.
Yeah, I think that's one difference between you guys and the U.S. is that I think the cost of care is kind of a barrier to care for guys here, and luckily you guys don't have that there.
Yeah, and you can see why that would happen. Like obviously having family in the States and things like that, and you see the cost of care, and out with just the general embarrassment of going to the doctors about something on your testicles or your balls. I think I even the cost must come into that. If you've not got insurance and it's not going to cover it, it must be really difficult.
So, talking about, you went to your GP, let's walk through that process. When exactly, how long after you saw your doctor the first time were you diagnosed with testicular cancer?
So it was about 2 weeks after, so it was a really quick turnaround, and I was lucky in that regard that, you know, because my GP was pretty confident in not knowing what it was. He got me an appointment as quick as he could at urology at my local hospital. Went up there, got the ultrasound, and when I got the ultrasound, there was a lot of kind of hilarity ensued that day anyway. I'd had my trousers, down that many times that I dropped them before I should have. And the wee woman who worked there needed a chaperone, and there's me just standing there. But because of that, I'd went back, I got my scan, and she'd actually said to me, "Oh, I think you're going to have to go back and see the consultant." To which it didn't register because I was still embarrassed about, having dropped my trousers when I shouldn't have. So I went back, had a good laugh with my wife, and then we went in to see the consultant neurologist within 20 minutes. And when he looked at the ultrasound, it was pretty kind of like, conclusive for him that it was a cancer. And then from then it was just booking me in to get the orchidectomy and get that testicle removed.
So, having seen the Cojones self check guide and kind of knowing how to do the exam and feeling the lump and then getting the confirmation that it was likely testicular cancer, did that kind of help you mentally prepare for the news, or was it still a shock?
It was still a shock, but I think, having had the self check guide and reading over the kind of stats, and obviously going on to the Cohen's Facebook page at the time, and seeing that there was a bit of me that was hopeful that it wasn't, but when it happened, it kind of became this tunnel vision almost of, right, okay, here's what we've got to do. And it didn't really hit me until the night before my surgery that, this was a big deal, and this is possibly, going to lead to more treatment. It could potentially lead to kind of chemotherapy, which I did go through. So yeah, it helped, but it helped blinker it down until I got to the stage where it was the back. Even though the urologist said that it was it was cancer. I think it wasn't until the surgeon and the biopsy came back, he went, no, no, it definitely is. So yeah, that it was at that point it really hit home.
Yeah. And how about for your wife? I mean, how long had you guys been together at this point, and how did that impact her?
So me and my wife had been together for I think 5 years at this point. Maybe not even, maybe just about 4 years. And it's quite a difficult thing. I think, one of the big things for us was that we were trying to grow our family. We had a wee boy that was there, and we, I think, for me, that ability to be a father and do that type of thing was obviously when that takes an impact, it's hard. But for my wife, she felt it almost as a bereavement, not in any kind of selfish way, but just certainly more of the, oh, this is something that we wanted that it could be taken away that isn't our choice. So yeah, it had a massive impact on her. But it's something that weirdly brought us even closer together. I think when you go through these things, as the same as they say here in Scotland, it can make you or break you, and it certainly made us.
That's great.
Mhm.
Um, so you had your orchidectomy, and I told Af Marseille this when we interviewed him that I think we got rid of the D when we beat England in the Revolutionary War. But anyway, we call it the orchiectomy over here.
Right.
So you did say that you had chemotherapy. So does that mean you were stage two or higher?
Yeah, it was stage two. The the system of what chemotherapy that I was going to get was going to change over the course of the time that I was about to get treated. It was, and I think it was going to get knocked down to like one kind of big blast, whereas when I went in, the that hadn't been quite approved yet. So I got 2 rounds of BEP chemotherapy, because it was kind of that looked as though it was creeping up into my abdominal lymph nodes at that point, with that first CT scan. So yeah, and got that, and it was funny when we went in because it was a Spanish doctor that kind of told me about the type of the chemotherapy, and she had this great accent, and it was like, "Yo, Paul, we're going to give you the big guns," and I was like, "That'll do, that'll do me. I'll take the big guns to get rid of this."
So you mentioned 2 rounds of BEP. Is that typical in Scotland? Because I know over here I had 4 EP and 3 BEP is pretty common over here, but I hadn't heard of anybody doing 2 BEP.
Yeah, I think it was kind of common just because of the type of like where my cancer wasn't, it hadn't fully spread yet. But like I say, that was going to change anyway to one, and I think from speaking to somebody recently, I think that dose is a lot longer. So I was in hospital for 3 days getting my BEP, and then I'd have my week off, and then I'd get my bleomycin jag. But I spoke to somebody recently who they were in for 5 days for that one round. So yeah, I think everything's just sort of changed in terms of how the BEP is getting kind of administered over here.
Gotcha. Okay. So with the chemo, what were some of the side effects that you felt? Did you lose your hair and you've got a nice beard? Did all that go to you?
Yeah, unfortunately, everything came out, and I looked more like Uncle Fester than the glorious bearded Viking that you see before you. Uh, but yeah, I think a lot of that. Yeah, I mean, the worst side effect for me was the nausea when I was going through it, and that fatigue. I I didn't really expect to be as tired as I was, because you think you're sitting in a hospital bed and you're not doing much, but I was completely wiped. I already had tinnitus or tinnitus, so but it got worse during my chemo, especially going into that second round. The high pitched squeal just got quite unbearable at times. I was quite lucky that I kind of got away with the peripheral neuropathy. I didn't really lose any feeling and things like that. But I think a lot of the stuff that had happened to me was out with the chemo, so I ended up with sepsis and avian flu during my treatment as well. So I had my first round of chemo, and then my second round was delayed because of like these two things. So yeah, it was quite intense.
Wow. Okay. So talk more about the having the flu during it because that's gotta not be fun.
Oh, it was horrible. I think like um, having all that anyway, and you're going through and your immune system's just completely shot. Um, it it was another 2 weeks of feeling even worse than I already did. You know, and because it was avian flu, I had to be um, isolated in the hospital as well. So I spent 2 weeks in a side room in my local hospital. So I think it just impacted that. I think you yourself, and you'll have found guys, even though you're going through this with people, it's really, really lonely. And I think when I ended up getting literally isolated, that loneliness just got worse. I think, so that was the kind of the worst part of that.
Yeah. About the loneliness and isolation, is that pretty typical for just the feeling of a man isolating when they have a diagnosis? Is that typical in the culture in Scotland, or are you guys more open about things than guys in the U.S. might be?
Uh, I'm not sure. I think it's pretty similar. I think, being being typically Scottish, you always put that kind of brave face on it, and I think you do look at those around you, and I think it's like, see when you get that look of warm empathy because you look so unwell, or you get that look of worry, it kind of, and especially for I think the guys that I've spoken to and myself, you look at people and you just try to kind of do a wee joke or wee something just to kind of break that, you don't want to be pitied, but at the same time, there's that part of you who's going, I don't want to be pitied, but just love me. But it's a strange combination of feelings, but it's certainly something that as men in Scotland we still do, and it's something that as cojones we try to. That's why we are out doing our talks and things like that to try and make sure that guys aren't feeling like that. That they know you should be open, and I was lucky enough that you know I have a group of friends who we're quite open with each other anyway, um, and I'm quite open about talking myself. But you, when you have that in your head and you have that worry of like other people's worry about you, you do tend to kind of block off, and it does get quite lonely.
Yeah. Did you say that you had a son at this time, or you were hoping for starting a family afterwards?
Yeah, so my son was 4 when I was going through treatment, and yeah, we were trying to have another baby at that time, and then again, all the complications that come with that, with your fertility, with having uh, the chemotherapy as well. So yeah, that was difficult in itself. Even after the this cancer treatment is finished, and I think that's the biggest thing. That I feel is that yeah, you've had your cancer, you've had your treatment, but actually when all that stops, it's kind of like people don't realize the noise that it creates, and then when that stops, you kind of go, oh, now I'm just left with all of this, and I don't really know how to cope with it, and it's such a big deal mentally.
Yeah. And your 4-year-old, was he old enough at the time to recognize that something with you had was going on, or was he too young to kind of realize?
No, I think he didn't at first. So we when I got my first round of chemo, he knew I was in hospital and it was fine. Um, and he helped. I thought I'm just going to shave my head. So rather than it fall out, I'll just shave it. And he helped me shave my head. But I remember him coming up, and I think after my surgery, he was quite taken aback by how I looked. I can't remember him saying this, but he'd said to my wife, like, Dad doesn't look good because I must have been pale white. But that was after the surgery. But then going through, when I was going through chemo, he could really tell because obviously, uh, especially because I had so many other illnesses during that. He was shipped out a lot. He was at the kind of the grandparents, and then so I think he felt the impact of that. Yeah.
And as he's grown up, I'm assuming he's now 13 or 14. What is the conversation like with him about his potential risk?
And we just talk about it openly. It's when you talk about he's so mindful of what Cojones is and what we do, and especially when I got the job, he was really excited for me as well. So yeah, he's 14 now. His and and I think that he's becoming more and more proactive in these checks and things like that as well. And it's not been a sit down and let's talk about this, like on the you see them do on sitcoms, but certainly over the course of like time, he pays attention. And the rugby club that he plays with, they actually put Cojones on his team's sleeves as well. So and he's very much aware, and I think he's always kind of talking about Cojones and what we do. So yeah, it's been a good thing in that sense, that he's aware that he needs to check himself and keep an eye.
Yeah, I mean, even if it wasn't for your involvement with Cojones, his awareness of what you went through and kind of growing up around it, I guess, will have a ripple effect in saving, his friends' lives. So that's good.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as like that's what happens, yeah, like you say, regardless of me having started working for Conas or not, that conversation would have took place, and it still would have been the same. So yeah, yeah.
Let's talk more about the other fertility concerns. I did read that you and your wife were, I guess, preparing for IVF and then were able to conceive naturally.
Yeah, yeah. So we went through that whole process. Obviously, it can take a bit of time. We'd hit that year mark, and we were just still concerned that things weren't kind of progressing the way we wanted to. We, I'd obviously had banked sperm over here as well. I don't. Do you guys do that in the States? Do you get the chance to do that as well? Yeah, yeah. So being able to do that, and it was just coming to the point of um, going up to the fertility clinic that's in Dundee, which is one of the cities in Scotland, to start that IVF journey. We thought, right, let's pause this. We'll take a break, and we went to Poland for a city break. Um, and when we came back, 2 weeks later, uh, I remember I was out doing. I think I was collecting Lachlan from school or something. But I went to my parents who stay quite close, and I can remember Pamela phoning me going, "Where are you? Where are you? I've been out in the street waiting on you." It's like, "Oh, I've just dropped Lachlan off at my mum and dad's," and got to the house, and she's like, "Look, we're pregnant," and so it was quite amazing. And it was funny because we had planned a date night for that night as well. So we went to see the first remake of It, the kind of the Pennywise movie, and the two of us are sitting in the cinema just like this, it's completely just smiling on our faces because we thought, right, we'll still go to the cinema, but there we were pregnant naturally, and didn't have to go down the IVF route. So we were really lucky in that regard. But I think the movie It has got a completely different meaning for us now as well.
Yeah, other people in the audience probably thought you guys were psychotic,
Yeah, yeah.
smiling at it.
Although we ended up going on to have a little girl, and she loves everything spooky and Halloween. So I'm pretty sure that must have had an impact on her.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. My wife and I hope to be in the same shoes as you soon. Um, let's talk about the system, if you can, of IVF. Is IVF covered through the NHS in Scotland?
It is for, I think it was 3 rounds of IVF you get covered, which is a huge benefit. It wasn't always like that. So I think IVF treatment for some female cancers, you would get that. But it's a recently new development in terms of that for any kind of male cancers, and especially testicular cancer. So, yeah, the cost of that, can obviously be an impact as well. So if you have to go through that, on top of having had cancer, and if you had to go through IVF and pay for that, um, it would impact in more significant ways than just financially. I think the strain of hoping and wanting it to work must be very different when you have to pay for it as well. I think we all know um, the pitfalls that can come along with anything medically. So it's good that we were able to get that, and it would have been like, obviously we never went through it, but you know the the stress of not worrying about the financial side would have helped a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's nice to have too, for sure. What was your surveillance period like? Does it mirror what's in the US where you have, more scans year one and then it kind of falls off as things progress?
Yeah, so pretty much the same. So that first, it was I had a final CT scan done, and then it was every month I would be back in for bloods and an X-ray, and then that changed to every 3 months, then every 6 months. Then once you kind of hit that 2 year mark, it was going to be once a year. It literally changed in terms of surveillance when I was getting my treatment. So it used to be that they'd look after you, surveil you for 10 years, whereas now it's just 5 years. So, unfortunately, because of COVID and everything, my 5 year surveillance ended up going 8 years. But yeah, so yeah, once that 5 years is done, that's you're signed off and ready to go back into the world.
Yeah, I know one thing that's kind of being more talked about now, and one of our board members is a researcher and has been looking into it. Cardiovascular disease, is that something that you guys are concerned about over there after having chemotherapy, like the potential risks on your heart?
I think over here there is there is obviously already studies over here about the kind of the risk on the heart, but I think it's the lungs, with especially with BEP. I think because it can scar the lungs because of the platinum, and the bleomycin can have such a big impact on that. That seems to be more of the kind of the case over here. Uh, I would I think now that looking back on it, my ability in terms of my cardiovascular health probably is impacted. Certainly, I don't feel like lung capacity wise, is as good as thankfully, and touch wood, you can never really feel much when it comes to your heart, but certainly, lung wise, it's definitely took its toll, and I ended up with COVID like 3 times as well. So it's definitely had an impact that way.
I guess when you had COVID, when you had to isolate, you had done it before, so you weren't used to, it wasn't new to you to have to, lock yourself away. I guess, right?
Yeah, I was just glad that I had the family with me at this point, so
Yeah.
you're able to can isolate with people. So yeah, but it was a strange one.
Let's talk about the last 10 years kind of as an ambassador for, or an advocate for raising awareness. You and I are in a weird boat where we kind of lean into our testicular cancer and we, tell other people's stories and we're involved. But some guys like to just kind of let it be part of their past. So talk about your decision to lean into it and become an advocate.
I think like my decision came around from like speaking and meeting Richie. The way that his passion for cojones when I eventually got to meet him when we done my testimonial. Um, it rubs off on you, and I think like, and when you see all the good work and all the the kind of cool wee campaigns that he was doing, it kind of made you want to get involved because you had already connected through the charity anyway. So I think just through um, yeah, kind of meeting somebody who was passionate about raising awareness made me, feel comfortable and passionate about doing it as a survivor. And I've never really shied away from talking about these things as well. I think that was the big thing, just my personality. I don't care. I'll speak to you about any aspect of my life that if you're interested in. So yeah, that was kind of the main focus on that, and that's what helped, with that, helping that advocacy with cojones at the start of it.
Do you find that like being so involved with it, and I'm speaking, this is something that's I feel is the case with me, but being so involved with it and talking with guys who, have been through it, I feel like I kind of feel phantom pains more often, maybe, or I'm in my head more about recurrence because I talk to guys who've had recurrence. Do you get that at all? Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's something I've spoke about recently. The phantom pain still occurs for me. Like, like you say at the top of this, nearly 10 years since the start, since I started my testicular cancer journey. And yeah, I still get phantom pains in a testicle that doesn't exist. It is a weird one. But I think as well, you know, it's been cathartic for me. I thought initially, I was worried, especially like when we started doing check 1, 2. I thought maybe I'm thugging myself in here, and I'm going to feel, worse mentally. But actually, being able to speak to guys and learn bits about their treatment, learn bits about my own, and even recalling memories that I forgot has been really quite cathartic and really helped actually.
What is the incidence of testicular cancer in Scotland? Like, I know in the U.S. there's just under 10,000 cases a year. What's it like for you guys? Being a smaller country.
Yeah, and so being a smaller country, it's obviously a little bit kind of less than that. So as Scotland, we've got about 220 to 230 cases a year. In the UK, in its entirety, it's about 2,400 cases a year. And that's steadily been forecast to rise to about 3,200 by the year 2030. So, yeah, and again, not massive instances, but there's the fact that unfortunately, with those small instances of testicular cancer across the UK, there's still 65 deaths a year related to it as well, which is it's so avoidable. So and that's part of the problem is that we don't talk about it, we don't educate about it, and these things can happen. So yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that I didn't ask about?
Um, no, I think I think just in general, it's just just making sure like obviously the people who listen to the podcast, they've either maybe had it or they're about or they're about to start their own journey. But it's just making sure to say to those around you to continue to do their checks, and if you do that, you know life check, just make sure it's any lumps, irregularities, firmness, and enlargement. Check for those four things, and hopefully you can catch it early, and early detection is key.
Yeah. Tell me about Check One Two, and I mentioned this to you, I think, in an Instagram message. I'm jealous of you guys' podcast name, but that's neither here nor
Yeah.
there.
And it was so funny because we were searching for ages trying to figure out what we were going to call the podcast, and Richie has got the boxes that we send stuff out in, and on the side of it I had hashtag check 1, 2, and it was just that eureka moment of going, that's what it should be called. So yeah, so we called it check 1, 2, and yeah, I think that's a year. We've been putting out episodes now. It's kind of going strength to strength. I think the more that people are seeing it, I think typically, I don't know how it's been like for you getting guests, but certainly in Scotland, you either come across guys who they're not comfortable in front of camera and talking, or they just don't want to talk about their experience publicly. But I think the more episodes we're getting out there, the more kind of people are seeing that he's interested in stories. And I think it's, again, like I said it earlier on, it's been really cathartic for me, and I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting all these guys, and helping create it's helping us create a community as well. I think that's one advantage to Scotland being geographically smaller, and you're able to kind of keep in touch and, kind of touch base with people a lot easier as well. But it's a great podcast. We got nominated this year for Best New Podcast at the British Podcast Awards. So we were really, really proud of that and came away with a highly commended, so we took that as a fourth. But it's great. It's something that I love doing, and it's great to be able to kind of to come on It Takes Balls as well and kind of cross share that message.
It seems like a lot of your guests are like boxers or athletes. Are those professions over there like kind of related to an increased risk, or are they just more keen to share their story because you mentioned like not being afraid to be on camera? Maybe they're just more used to it.
Yeah, I think it's odd, It's like it's funny. You look at the amount of guys we've had on, and it's like athletes, comedians, and rugby players and things like that. And I think there is just a willingness and able to talk about it. I think that is a big thing. I think these guys are so used to speaking, openly about many situations as well. So I think that really it does have an impact. But again, that's the thing that we find. You've got all these like young sports people, fit as they can be, yet over here, our sporting institutions, aren't really kind of focused on testicular cancer. So it's another door to break down for us as well.
Yeah, well, I think you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
I enjoy listening, and like I said at the beginning, I love the accent, so that always. I told Af when I interviewed him, I read his book in his accent.
Oh, did you? Love that. Yeah, Af's a great guy. There's obviously we had him on ours as well, and yeah, it's good, and it's great to be able to kind of hear the different stories and know that worldwide this is an issue, and nobody's truly alone. There's always it's even if you didn't come across somebody, you would be able to find something somewhere that you've got people talking about it. So yeah, I think that's the important thing. If we create those communities, not just locally but globally, I think it really helps.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope to be over in England next summer for my sister-in-law's graduation. So I don't know if I'll be able to make it to Scotland, but if so, I'd love to meet up.
Well, definitely, yeah. If you can get up, yeah, definitely come. I'll show you the tune, as they say.
Great, Paul. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
So right across all social media, if they want to look for Cojones Scotland, it's Cojones Scotland across all the social media. If they want to find me, it's Cojones Paul across everything, really. I'm on TikTok as well now, so I try to get the clips out there. But the Check 1 2 podcast, you can get that on all good streaming services. I think the most ones is Apple and Spotify, and you can watch it on YouTube as well. So yeah, we're across everywhere. So give us a wee like and a follow would be much appreciated.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you so much for being on It Takes Balls.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you.
For more information and resources for your testicular cancer journey, visit testicularcancerawarenessfoundation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Testis Cancer. We're on Facebook at Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation.